methadone and buprenorphine are forms of opioid agonist therapy that are prescribed first line to treat opioid use disorder. But due primarily to risks of overdose, access is highly regimented, with people often having to go to the pharmacy daily to pick up doses. During the pandemic, concerns about discontinuation of treatment due to limited access to pharmacies led to changes in guidance on take-home doses for methadone and buprenorphine. The objective of this study was to assess the benefits and risks of those changes to people accessing treatment for opioid use disorder in Ontario. This is important because more relaxed access to take-home doses of these drugs is something that many people have been requesting for quite some time, due to the challenges that they face maintaining employment and quality of life when having to go to the pharmacy daily. Therefore, these pandemic-related shifts really presented us with an opportunity to use the real-world data housed at ICES to assess the safety of more relaxed take-home doses in clinical practice, as well as whether the expected benefits for patients were realized. We studied all people who were actively taking methadone or buprenorphine in Ontario when the COVID-19 pandemic first arrived in the province in March 2020. We then separated them into cohorts based on their degree of take-home doses before the pandemic. Specifically, we studied those who were receiving daily dispensed opioid agonist therapy before the pandemic, and those who were receiving weekly dispensed opioid agonist therapy before the pandemic, as these represented individuals with likely different stability and underlying risk of overdose. Within each of these cohorts, we compared people according to whether they received more flexible take-home doses, and were then able to evaluate risks such as whether those who received extended take-home doses had any increased risk of overdose, and benefits such as whether they avoided treatment discontinuation or interruption. We found that overall, those who received more flexible take-home doses of methadone or buprenorphine had similar or lower risk of overdose, and were less likely to discontinue treatment or have a short-term gap in therapy. These findings were consistent across treatment types and prior take-home dose levels. Broadly, these findings are very reassuring, as they suggest that the changes in clinical practice that were recommended early in the pandemic as a way to address the structural barriers that people might face in accessing opioid agonist therapy were able to successfully support people staying in treatment and didn't put them at an increased risk of overdose. While this has important implications during the pandemic, as governments and clinicians are seeking to evaluate their response, they also have the potential to continue to inform future practice in this area across North America. Even 2 years into this pandemic, we have continued to see sustained recommendations for more flexible take-home doses across Canada and the United States, with policymakers considering opportunities to make these changes more permanent. It's our hope that this research can contribute to the evidence that's emerging during the pandemic of the benefits of more flexible treatment options for people with opioid use disorders. In particular, this work shows the benefit of reconsidering our historical restrictive approaches to opioid agonist therapy and working towards more patient-centered care for people with substance use disorders.